11:30, and we are going to get started with our ongoing series of coalition capacity webinars that Prevention hosts each year. This year, or this particular month, we are going to focus on board development and retaining coalition membership. We are having this workshop thanks to our president and CEO of Prevention First, Nicole Schisler. And there she is there. And Nicole, could you advance to the next slide if possible? Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay, there we go.
There we go. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes. Continuing education will be awarded for those who view the entire live session. That is a key element in order to get your CEUs. You must attend the entire training to receive those. There will be a post-event evaluation survey that you'll need to complete at the end of the session to receive your continuing education. And then for social work and mental health counselor credits, you must provide your license number in the post-event evaluation survey. For CHES credits, you must provide your CHES ID for the survey as well. And you will receive your certificate for continuing ed by mail, or by email rather, within 30 days of this training. Nicole, actually I can go ahead. Okay. So real quick, I want to just introduce our wonderful president and CEO, Nicole Schisler. She is our president and CEO, and she's worked in the prevention field since 1997. She's professionally credentialed as an Ohio certified prevention consultant and a master certified health education specialist. She has a Bachelor of Science in Community Health from Ohio University and a Master of Education in Health Promotion and Education from the University of Cincinnati. She happens to be the 2019 recipient of the University of Cincinnati College of Education, Criminal Justice and Human Services Distinguished Alumni Award. She is a member of the Hamilton County Addiction Response Coalition, and she is a master trainer for SAMHSA's Substance Abuse Prevention Skills Training. So we welcome Nicole, and we look forward to any questions that you have, which we'll save for the end. But other than that, I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. Amanda will be monitoring the chat and the questions and answer session throughout this time, but I know I can't see you, you can see me. There are several of you on this webinar, so I just wanted to let you know, I want to keep this casual, but I also want to stay on time. So if at any point you want to raise your hand, we will address everything at the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in, and I might ask some questions throughout, and that will give you the opportunity to participate in some chat that Amanda can help me with. So thank you everyone for being here. So I looked at the registration list last night, and several of you are within Ohio. Some of you I know, some of you I do not know. And so I wanted to give a brief overview of Prevention First for those of you who are not familiar with us. And for those of you who are or have worked with us in the past, perhaps some things are new for you. So as an organization, we are strategically focused on data-driven decision-making. That is our Center for Prevention Science. Engaging the community, implementing evidence-based prevention across sectors, increasing the prevention infrastructure. That is our work through the Ohio Coaching and Mentoring Network, which we call OCAM. You may have taken some trainings from them before. And then growing organizational resources. So as the president and CEO, I'm responsible for the entire organizational strategic focus. However, a lot of my time is spent under that last area of growing organizational resources. So what that entails and what I'll be going through today is increasing financial support is under our grow organizational resources, maintaining an 18 to 20 person board of directors, and then within that is through our annual nominations and term renewal. So a couple of just important things here, as this is a continuing education opportunity. The objectives I'll be covering today are participants will understand the significance of building and sustaining a competent board. I will help you identify individual board member responsibilities. And then the last one is the board's role in ensuring adequate financial resources. So the title of this webinar is Board Development and Sustaining Coalition Membership. But what I will do today is I'll speak interchangeably about coalition board, executive committee. So really what I'm asking of you as the audience is, not knowing you, not knowing what's bringing you to this webinar, I would like for you to kind of just take it as what might work best for you. So you might not have a board per se, but you might be a coalition and you have an executive committee. So I'm going to be covering best practices of governance, and however you choose to make that for your situation is up to you. But we at Prevention First, we operate as a nonprofit board of directors because we are a 501c3, which means that we are an official nonprofit organization, and we are responsible for our own fiscal requirements. So I will go over the basic components of board governance and strategies for retaining membership, but I do encourage you to participate in the chat and with your camera because, as we know, in this Zoom world, talking to myself for 45 minutes can be boring. So let's go ahead and get started. So this first area is looking at building and sustaining a competent board. So some of the things that I looked at while I was putting this presentation together is some best practices for building a board, but additionally just some things that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So when these particular orange areas, if you will, or all of this as a whole, I just wanted to specifically identify best practices. When they're implemented correctly to provide, they will provide long-term membership. People want to feel needed, connected to what is important to them, and valued for their time. So when you think about putting together individuals to come around your table to care for your organization, it's definitely a win-win. So anytime I engage a new board member, or even if we have existing board members, I like to touch base with them. Just make sure that they feel that they're utilizing their skills to the best of their ability. I want them to feel connected to who we are and what we do, and I want them to feel valued for their time. And I will say that Zoom has made that somewhat difficult over the past couple of years. We have usually a board class of like 3 to 6 new people each year. And so for FY22 and FY23, I hadn't actually met in person those individuals that were in our FY22 class, or FY21, which we only brought one person on. But due to the pandemic, it's just really been difficult. So I commend our board members for really communicating with myself as the CEO, but then also each other, just to stay mentored and making sure they're connected to the process. So when you think about what might make up a board for your organization, I encourage you to think about what type of organization you are and what are your current strategic goals. Perhaps you're on this webinar today because you are starting a new organization, or you're on this webinar today because you want to take your nonprofit or the group that you're working with into a different direction. So when you really sit down and think about what the type of organization is and what your current goals are, that will help you determine what your organization needs in terms of a size of a board, what you want those members to contribute, demographic considerations, and then really their capacity for philanthropy. And one thing I want to emphasize throughout this webinar is that the idea of fundraising and contributions of your board, creating a culture that makes fundraising not awkward. So really putting it into every conversation, at least every board meeting, checking in on finances, which we'll go through. But you want it to be a comfortable conversation in regards to what their capacity is for giving. But that doesn't always mean their own individual selves. Can they do an organizational match? Or can they bring people to your annual awards dinner or your annual fundraiser? So it's really that constant conversation and creating that idea of fundraising within the work. So when you're looking at your current strategic goals and who might make up your board, if you're a new organization and you're engaging in a new project for development, for example, you want to maybe bring on a real estate agent or somebody who, a broker who knows about leases in terms of agreement or buildings. So it's really just sitting down and thinking about at that specific time. The makeup of my board will not be the same as yours because we're in different perspectives. And then, so with our board, we serve Northern Kentucky, Southeastern Indiana, and Southwest Ohio. So really, historically, we have tried to have individuals from all three of those states, or at least that represent populations from those states, on our board because we want those demographics included in our conversations. So you want to look at their commitment to the organization. I will show you some examples of some skill building or some skills that you can draw out from individuals to see if they might be a fit for your board. And then really, what is their philanthropic spirit? I have several examples over the years that I've worked here at Prevention First that you can know in an instant when somebody is into the philanthropy of the region. People know them, they're connected to United Way, they're connected to the different goals, health goals of the region. So it might not be that that person necessarily has a deep pocket, but they know philanthropy, they know what's going to work in the community. And then, so building a competent board, then that second area is level of expectation. So you want to clarify roles and expectations through a nominating committee. Some boards call their nominating committee a governance committee, and really whoever serves on your nominating committee should be a well thought out person. Some of the resources I looked at suggest that that person or those individuals are top leaders in your board. For us, particularly at Prevention First, the bylaws state that our nominating committee chair is the immediate past board chair. So that's what's written in our bylaws. Currently, what we're living out is this individual has been off the board or been on the board, but not a chair for a couple of years, and he still enjoys serving through the nominating committee. So he and I communicate regularly, and then he'll bring in other board members to help him when it comes to nominations, which I'll go over. So the level of expectation must be there to look at who's on your nominating committee, and then a term limit. One of the things that Prevention First just engaged in is we amended our bylaws. So originally our bylaws were constructed in 1996, and then throughout the years, you can see in the document that they've been amended. And we've always had a term limit, but what wasn't clear is how long they can serve those terms. So I think one thing that helps with engagement, one thing that helps with sustainability is that term limit. So now it states that they serve a 3-year term, and then at the end of that 3-year term, they have to be nominated or re-voted on, and they can serve 3 consecutive terms. So anybody who entered our board FY23, July 1st, they are now under that new requirement. But those who have already been on our board, they are going to stay on for the rest of their lives. No, I'm just kidding. But it really is nice because 9 years is a really good chunk of time. I mean, it really is a dedication to the commitment of the organization. So I feel comfortable with that. Some expectations you should have for your current board members are they should be helping you scout prospective candidates. So every February, we open up the nomination process to our board, and they will put individuals forward. They fill out an official form that is sent to me of who they want to nominate or who they feel might be able to fulfill the duties of the board. And and then from there, the nominating chair and I will reach out to them, have an initial meeting. And again, we've been doing all this over Zoom for the past couple of years, and it seemed to have worked fine. So each year, I encourage you to, at the beginning of every fiscal year, review the expectations for all board members. So some of them can get comfortable and really just need to be reminded, what we're expecting of them. We do a board survey, 2 kinds of board surveys. One is when they initially start, we assess their skill levels and just kind of see what we have. Sometimes our nominations are strategic in the sense that recently, maybe we needed a new police officer from law enforcement sector. So we very well know that we are seeking that particular sector of the community in addition to whatever nominations come in. And then we can look at their skill sets and think about where we might want to place them on the board. As well as there's another survey that I can share as a resource, and that looks at how engaged the board feels in the process of your organization. So when I started this presentation, I laid out basically our strategic plan and a narrative. We have 5 goals, and all of those goals were set out by the board. They were a part of the strategic plan. They had input to the strategic plan. And so really, you want to make sure that your board feels connected. So we'll do sometimes an annual, or at least every couple of years, a board survey just to see, could you go out into the community today and speak to our mission, our vision, our successes? And chances are you're going to have some that might not feel empowered by that. So that's something that you can work on as a leader or a member of a board. Every year we host a new board member orientation. Ours for this year is actually August 10th. So each of the new board members have a mentor. So the board member and their mentor will attend a orientation on August 10th. I do it around lunchtime so they can just pop on at their lunch break and understand our organization and what are their expectations. So then the first board meeting of the year that they participate in is the following week. One thing that we started doing a couple years ago is ensuring opportunities for in-service. So we dedicate anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes. Sometimes that can be too long, but it just depends what we're talking about. And I invite individual staff members into our board meetings, and they will talk about just one program. So every month we do a coalition strategies report is what we call it. So what I take out of that is I don't necessarily read the report to them, but I'll pull out one particular area of that report and have that that staff member come in and talk about that. So it really just engages the board and makes some of this paperwork that they look at every month come alive. Another suggestion for in-service, if you will, is to have someone come in and speak to board development. So maybe they do need help understanding their role in fundraising, or what is, how can I participate in fundraising without just necessarily giving my annual contribution? So there's all different aspects of board development, which is what we're talking about today. So it could be a good topic for a conversation. The next area is the governance structure. So here's an example of what your governance could look like. Every board, it is recommended, has some level of committees that can break down and report to the overall board. So you have an executive committee, which our executive committee is comprised of our chair-elect, our past chair, and then those who are involved in specific committee leadership. We also have 2 individuals who serve as at-large members, and then myself, I'm on there as the CEO, but I don't have voting privileges. I'm particularly just the liaison between the organization and its governance. Finance, development, and then I talked a little bit about what that nominating committee could look like, and then communications and marketing. Oftentimes, a board might need an ad hoc project team. So perhaps you're doing a financial audit, or you want to plan a fundraiser. Last year, we had a strategic plan work group, and it was a couple of board members that volunteered to solely focus on the strategic plan. And then they were responsible for updating the board in the monthly meetings, what was going on with the strategic plan. One of the main roles of a goal is to hire the top leadership of the organization. So when my predecessor retired after about 20 years with our organization, there was a specific project committee that was completely for the executive search. So they, again, came up with a plan, and they were able to find me and hire, but for any other organization, that is the role of a board, is to find the leadership of that organization. And then annually in July, I am responsible for doing a performance review with the executive committee, who then reports to the board. Perhaps there's a grant review team as well. So if you wanted to take that and show it in a organizational chart, here might be an example. This is modified of what ours looks like, but we have our board of directors. We have an executive committee, finance. We combined our development and marketing, which is led by our development coordinator, who we call stewardship coordinator, and also our director of communications. And then we have a nominating committee as well. But then you kind of go down into the centers of the organization and how we get the work done. What's not represented on here is our training hub, but when we were first kind of founded, or when we redid our org chart, board level committee members ideally would lead these centers, but that might not always be the case. But definitely board members are responsible for leading the executive committee, finance, development, nominating. So ideally finance is your treasurer. Nominating I spoke to is the past chair, and executive committee is the chair and the chair-elect lead those two roles. So I can't emphasize enough how much you want to make your current board part of your recruitment. So perhaps you don't have a board and you're just on here because of coalition membership, like the same thing. If you have a community coalition and you're looking to build your coalition, get input from the current members and what is best for the organization. The most important thing is that the board understands their fiscal responsibility in making fundraising and fund development a priority. So when you put some focus into this area, it helps you to plan, share your story, engage new partners, and ultimately your goal should consistently be to raise your bottom line. So I wanted to suggest some resources. The presentation that I put together today is based on experience, but it's also this book, my very favorite thing in the whole world. And it's called The 10 Basic Responsibility of Nonprofit Boards. And I will put all of this in an email to you afterwards, but this little book is very handy. I even have like Post-it notes, and I used a highlighter. Like, this is all like school stuff. But so BoardSource is responsible for putting together this booklet, and boardsource.org is a huge resource. I visit it frequently, and I know that a lot of people, when they need information on governance, all the different facets of a board, utilize this resource. So it is a national organization that focuses exclusively on good governance practices for nonprofit board of directors, chief executives such as myself, funders. And locally, one of the things that I challenged myself with a couple years ago was to participate in a local group here in Cincinnati that's called the BOLD program. So it stands for Board Orientation and Leadership Development. It was a 6-week course that I participated in on Zoom, and it really looked at leadership development. So the target population for that class is individuals who want to be part of a board. So I was a unique participant in the sense that I lead a board, but it really gave me a perspective of the expectations of members. And so I graduated in the BOLD 7 class, and really this has been the greatest resource for me from this opportunity. Was this book, and then the different things that I've learned, which are sprinkled throughout this presentation. So I encourage you to look it up. It's brought to you by a local organization, but if you just search BOLD, B-O-L-D program offered by OneSource and the Nonprofit Leadership Council, then it'll pop up. So when looking at organizational governance, there are some key products that I would like to bring to your attention. So again, the orange highlights represent those that are best practices. No matter at what level your group, your board, your committee, whatever you're choosing to call them, should come together, is every organization should have bylaws. And really what that helps the individual just be governed. It helps them have rules. So even if you're not your own fiscal agent, it is really encouraged to have bylaws because those will give you decision-making process. And really it's something that when a bunch of people are in a room, it really gives a nice process to the group. So when you think about the key components of bylaws, you want to reiterate and really emphasize to people what the board responsibilities are. What is your purpose as an organization, as a group? Perhaps you're the PTA or you're the boosters organization. Everybody needs to know why they are in that room and why they're meeting. Each group should have charters. So our particular organizational chart that I showed you a glimpse of, each of those committees have their own charters, which states how many people can be on them, what their purpose is, their frequency of meetings. Each of the officers of your organization, so the chair-elect, the treasurer, are all considered officers. So they need their own job descriptions and really what is their expectations? Because you take on an officer role, they really need to understand what their time commitment is, what their legal contributions can be. So it's a volunteer role that has a lot of expectations around it. There's some things that organizations might only give authority to. So really, what is their special authority as a board? And then anytime there is an amendment within your bylaws, it needs to be noted and voted on by the board. But the bylaws should be tailored to meet the needs of your organization. These rules may not be appropriate forever and should really look at steps for revision. So when we redid our bylaws, we updated it with several of our new committees that had been added throughout the years. We had references to maybe some things that are out of date in regards to technology. So there was no rules around like Zoom or different ways of communicating between the boards. So we updated all of that. And really, you can have, or you should have, an attorney look through these. So that those individuals that were on our subcommittee for the bylaw reformation were attorneys and then some people who had worked in HR. But they can tell you about nonprofit law and really just things that I don't have the experience to know. So two very important things to delineate then are the board role and the staff role. So this comes up a lot in coalition work because a lot of organizations start out as volunteer and then they become more structured as maybe some funding comes in or they get to hire staff. But what should not happen is everything that the board did in a volunteer basis. Okay, we got someone to do this now in a paid role. They can't do everything. This doesn't become like Nicole's coalition because all of a sudden I'm the first paid staff member. It's still owned by the community or whatever your organizational purposes are. So in regards to the staff role, they should support the board, coordinate implementation of the strategic plan. So our strategic plan is based on these kind of 3 to 4 areas down here. So really this top area is myself and the board are responsible for. And then when you get down into this programmatic area, that's where our staff comes in, and their role is to support the needs of the board in the sense of the strategic direction that the board has set, not necessarily like the individual particular request of the board, but what am I doing? What is my role as a staff member to support the strategic goal, which and then lifts up to what the mission of the organization is. And the board is there to govern, set strategic direction, ensure that we are financially responsible, and then maintaining accountability. So after the presentation, I will load into the recording will be online under our training hub. And some of the resources I want to share with you are a couple that I put together is the 10 basic responsibilities of a nonprofit board. So that's a PDF. I found this recruitment toolkit. It's like 32 pages long, but you can pick and pull some really neat things out of there. I think that could show you how to best recruit. I will share with you the skills and diversity matrix. So that looks at how do you define a skill set? Like I think sometimes that's really hard to describe what you're looking for. And then I shared our board volunteer job description. So that will, that is what, when someone approaches us to be on our board or they've gone through the nominating process, they're actually given a job description of what is expected of them. I'm going to pause for a second, see if there's any questions or hand raised. Amanda, are we good?
I do not see any right now, so you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next area is identifying board member responsibilities. So as a board member, you are accepting quite the responsibility of an organization. They need to understand their role, how encompassing it is, and really that you are representative of our organization while we're meeting, but then also out into the community. And really it's important that they understand that their role is to strengthen our capacity as an organization. So some general expectations are always good. They need to participate in meetings. So your bylaws and their job description should say, this is how often we meet. For us, it's 6 times a year on the 3rd Wednesday at 8 a.m. So right there from the get-go, the meetings are on your calendar, and then please communicate with us if you're unable to attend. Through the years, we've had some interesting dynamics with the relationships with staff, particularly if a board member is in charge of a committee. What I think you need to set straight initially with boundaries is that doesn't mean that you're in charge of that staff member. This is a partnership or a liaison between the work of the board and the work of the staff. So some of the conflict that we've had in the past is a few board members that really thought that because they were over this committee that they were over that staff member, and that was not the case. So again, setting those expectations. Avoiding conflict of interest. So a best practice is make sure that you are having each of your board members sign a conflict of interest form, and I will include that as the resources as well. I just put an example of ours. They need to really look at what their fiduciary responsibilities. So it's not always about giving, but as a board member, you will be asked to read and understand the organization's financial statements, monitor, control, and transfer of funds. So we have a finance committee, but each month the board will look at our profit and loss. They'll look at our budget, they'll look at our balance, and they look at our cash accrual and then what we project to be our cash for the upcoming months. So our accountant every month lays out for the year at a 12-month where we should be within that month. So a board member should be able to speak to and understand what those financial statements are saying, and really what, kind of making these numbers come alive. What do we need them to do with these numbers? Fundraising is, the expectation is that every board member gives an unrestricted annual gift. I do not put a dollar amount on that. It's really up to them and what they're comfortable with for themselves and their family. But we do ask for 100% board commitment because we write that in grants. Specifically, if you're going after private foundation money, the very first question that most of them ask if they're vetting you as an organization is, do you have 100% commitment monetarily from the board? From looking at it as an ambassador of your organization, your board members should feel comfortable knowing what the organization's story is. They should be able to speak to accomplishments, but that's just not something they're going to know. I mean, this isn't their day job. They're not in it every day. So really giving them tips and tools about how they can talk about an organization. Throughout the years, we've given them pamphlets or talking tips. One time they requested it like on a card that might be able to slip into a purse or a suit pocket. But if they're out talking about your organization, they really should have the most up-to-date information, because guess what's going to happen is opinions and probably false news stories are going to come into the conversation. So you really want them to be able to stay on point and be an ambassador for who you are and what you do as an organization. I like this slide because it shows what the difference is between a board member and a staff member. So the board should be able to affiliate themselves with your mission. We are a community coalition, so we want them to understand as a group serving this community, what is our mission? They need to actively participate in meetings. And a lot of times we will draw on them to look at their resources. So as a professional, what perhaps influence do they have? And then personally, typically in a nonprofit such as ours that's focused on behavioral health, such as substance use disorders, the promotion of mental wellness, gambling, somebody is coming to your board because they've had a personal experience. So what does that mean to them? And really what kind of influence do they have in the community? And then the board should participate in the development of all the strategies. So they're not going to go into the weeds. When I was first learning this job, I was instructed to keep everything at 40,000 feet for the board. Unless they absolutely need to get into the weeds, that's when you develop an ad hoc. But when you're reporting, when you are giving overviews, this is an opportunity for them to really just 40,000 feet. What do they need to know? Are we doing what we're supposed to do? And then a staff member is those that should be looking at the day-to-day business of the coalition or the work organization, compile reports, facilitate meeting coordination, looking at the work of the committee and the work group chairs. So really, I'm guilty of this at times. If I'm struggling with perhaps like some of the day-to-day stuff and I go to our board chair, I'm quickly reminded that a board is not personnel. You need human resources or another way to monitor your day-to-day staffing, hiring. They can give insight, but really as an expectation of the board, it's really not their job to be able to comment on personnel issues, conflicts between staff, or some of the other things that come up day to day. But I know that I can rely on any of the board members if I had a question or really getting to know them and understand what their area of expertise is. I know that I could call them at any time, but I still need to have a process that doesn't just rely on them. So what is suggested as a best practice for boards is really developing a case for support. So when I talked about your board members being ambassadors for your organization, really you as an organization should come up with a case statement is what we call it, or a case for support, but it's talking about your organization. So what is the program in need, or the organization itself? What's the community need? Really laying out talking points about program objectives and benefits, target populations, what is the funding need, and what is the opportunity for sponsorship benefits. So we have a case for support, particularly just for our fundraiser, what it is, how it serves the community, what are we hoping to attain through this, and what do we need? So maybe we need a table sponsorship. Maybe we're asking you to provide cookies. I just made that up, but it's really looking at the benefits and really how is that win-win? So that constant conversation, even if you're asking for money or you're asking for non-monetary support, it's really what is the case of your organization, who you are, and what do you need? So I suggest everybody having one of those for their board members, or if you're asking them to do something, you need to give them those materials. So some resources that I'll send to review for this particular objective, the individual board members' responsibilities, is I will send you the board volunteer job description, and then I'll also show you the conflict of interest document. So just to have a little conversation back and forth here, we're about halfway through, is can you identify one way that you measure organizational success? And then how do you share it with the board? So if you could just type in the chat, we'll just take it from a couple people, but I'm just interested to know when you're reporting to the leadership of your organization from a governance standpoint, what do you talk to them about and how do they share it?
Nicole, while they're doing that, we do have one question. Can you have a coalition without a board?
Yes, you can, because really that would be your coalition leadership. I would suggest though that ideally probably the coalition is serving as your leadership team. So you might want to form like an executive committee from that. That's how we started out, was we didn't have a board. But when you become a fiscal agent, so if you choose to become a 501c3, then you should definitely have a board of directors that's guiding that nonprofit requirements. But a coalition can just have leadership, and really that's kind of your go-to. But again, being governed by bylaws is key, whatever you choose to call yourselves.
I just had to open, the chat feature was disabled, so I just opened it.
That's kind of important.
Yeah, so everyone, it should be open now.
And Melissa, my email is somewhere in this presentation. So if you have further questions, please feel free to reach out. Is it still disabled? Did I ask something?
No, they're typing it in.
Oh, okay.
Can you give me the question again and I'll type it just to be sure if anyone missed it?
Sure. It's just, how do you measure organizational effectiveness? So if there's something that you're really excited about that you've accomplished, how do you share it with your board? And really, it sounds like, hi, Kelsey, that Kelsey will really report the accomplishments of their coalition at their meetings. So is that typical practice?
Okay, there we go. How do you measure organizational effectiveness? How do you share it with you?
So thank you, Kelly. She says she likes to report on data numbers as well as narrative information, including quotes from participants. That's huge. They really want to know the impact on the community. Even though that's not necessarily their role, it's really, what does that look like for how you report? So the data, and then really how you're making it come alive. Yes, thank you, Jessica. They love numbers affecting students for prevention organization. We've got anecdotes, quotes from users. These are all wonderful things. So I think really what our board likes to see is, how is that strategic plan coming alive? So whether it's a quarterly report, but Andrea, hi, Andrea. So once those measures of those evaluations, she's suggesting the program evaluation, just spot on, and then really help them understand what that means to real people. So you are in the early stages, Kristen, I see. So you're just now forming an effective committee. I'm sorry, an executive committee, same thing, effective executive. But the coalition level data, success stories, and membership engagement. So these are all really good things. And thank you for sharing. I'm gonna move on, but thank you for participating in the chat. So the last objective is the board's role in ensuring adequate financial resources. So the as an organization, we help the board to understand really that they provide financial oversight. So really, a board should be presented with the operating budget. They need to understand all of the diverse funding streams. If you have one funding stream, that's fine. If you don't have any funding streams, that's fine too, but perhaps you should be tracking your in-kind donations or some level of how is this organization functioning. So the budget realistically should be based on your history as well as your, the external environment of what's going on. We as an organization, you can see here, this is a sample budget, but this looks pretty similar, oddly enough, to how we track our work. But we have government grants, but we also have some private foundations that we work with. We have corporate donations, individual contributions. So that's measured in just one-on-one donations, or those that we get from our annual luncheon, and then special event income. So every year we set a goal around our annual luncheon, which is in the spring. So this particular example shows that it is our goal to come up with $10,000 of net income. So that doesn't include our expenses. And then feast for service. Some of our products that we sell as an organization are our Parents Guide, our Faith-Based Toolkit. We also charge for training sometimes when looking at if it's a request that's external to what we're currently being funded for, then that is a nice fee for service for us. So it's, let me see here, hold on. But really it's that idea of fund development. So every month allowing the board to see where you are, because this also helps them see how you're reaching your goals, and maybe they know of their corporation or another corporation that offers a match. So we have one of our board members every year, whatever donation he gives personally, his board or his corporation matches it. So his donation would go under individual contributions, but then when his company matches it, we put that under corporate donations. So wherever you are in this coalition process or as an organization, you should have either a subcommittee or like it's part of our board is the development. So we have what we call the development committee, which is now the development and marketing committee. They used to be separate, but their work really overlaps. So you want that to be a board level committee, which means that it is led by a board member, it's reported on, it's part of your organizational structure. These individuals are volunteers. So your chair, board members, and other volunteers to show the support. And then those subcommittees or work groups can really focus on individual donors, organization donors, and special events. So we participate in the Kroger, I can't think of it right now, the rewards program, and then Amazon Smiles as well. So when those monthly donations come in, regardless of the size of it, those are considered corporate donations. So that's an external way of raising money that we participate in that then comes into small funds, no matter what it could be, but that's unrestricted dollars. So when those dollars come in, we can put those into our operating budget and spend them as needed, whereas the government grants and the foundation grants typically have deliverables associated with it. And I liked this so much, I highlighted it, but resource development. So think about what that means. Resource is really what is the contributions of the group? What are they bringing to the table? And that includes fundraising is a function of the full board. So really the board members should be checking in with you and really always be thinking about how they can contribute, what that looks like. Okay. So each year we develop an annual fund plan. So if you're going to say we want to raise this amount of money or this is the budget that we're sending, then what's your plan? So we have an annual fund plan. We break it down by individual donors, organizational donors, and fundraising events. So I talked a little bit about this, but this kind of defines it a little bit more. So every year we have a board campaign. So within the 12-month fiscal year, each board member has an expectation of donating. And so we actually have a campaign around it, and we follow up and make sure that they know. But this doesn't come necessarily from myself or from our other staff. This comes from the chair of the development committee, because that is part of their work in development. We have about 100-ish past board members that we communicate with regularly, and we do a past board campaign every year. We also do a past board luncheon, past board Zoom meeting now. But really, it's a really nice insight to those who have contributed to your organization in the past. And where are they now? What's important to them? We regularly have our founders check in to see what we're up to. What is our pace of growth? And then we get, some donations per year from past board, and then individual and major donors. Organization donors, we put under private foundations, corporate, and alternative opportunities, which is what I talked about with like Kroger and Amazon, or perhaps you do like a Chick-fil-A day where all the profits go to your organization. That would go under organizational donors. And then what are your fundraising events? We choose to do one per year. We used to do two with a golf outing that we did. It was more of a golf event, like a skill building golf, but we really just didn't have the capacity to carry that on anymore. So we do a community awards luncheon, used to be a breakfast. We've hit all the meals. We've never done dinner, but now we're at lunch, which seems to work well with business people and those that are professionals that can attend. So it's really anytime you're bringing in additional funds from individuals, or it's a very strategic planned event. So here's a look at what our annual fund goals are. I made this up, but every year, you know, you should have a goal for what you want from your board and be honest with them. Like, this is our goal. This is what we want to come up with. Last year, we exceeded our goal, so that's always fun. Past board, you're not really asking a lot of them. You know, anything is helpful. You want them to be engaged in your work. Individual donors, with our luncheon, we typically can hit right around $1,000 just from their ticket purchases and other donations. But here's some other goals for the private foundations I talked about, corporations, alternative opportunities. So one time I hosted like a Tastefully Simple party at my house. I don't know if you all are familiar with those products, but the host that came into my home agreed to give a portion of her sales back to Prevention First. So I think we made like $200, and that was an alternative opportunity. And then there's your actual fundraising events. So some resources that I will share that ensure adequate financial resources is the tips for board fundraising. That's a fairly lengthy document, but it's really important to show really what the board should be doing. I also encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to observe another board beside yourself is really helpful. So as part of my homework, when I took that BOLD class, I had to reach out to another CEO and ask to observe their board. So I chose the Free Store Food Bank, and I wasn't sure about this whole like fundraising culture or talking about it all the time, but it is literally their whole conversation. I mean, they're like, it's coming in from here, here's this, here's that. And, you know, it's time for your board donation. So there was no awkwardness. It really wasn't like a set thing on the agenda. It was a constant conversation about how do we continue to develop this organization and do good in the community. And then I'll share with you a one-pager that's the board's role in advocacy. One thing that I've noticed and that I learned from the BOLD program is that you want your board to ask questions of you, and even sometimes think like what they should be asking. So I had some examples that I came up with. And then also when you are recruiting board members, you want them to ask questions of your organization. Hey, can I see your 990? Which is, as a 501c3, we're required to have a 990 that goes into our tax and our financial contribution as a 501c3. So that's a public document. It should be on every organization's website. And I've had people say, you know, a lot of times private foundations will look at your 990 before they give to you. So some questions that you should ask, you should have them ask are, what is the contingency plan in the event? I'm on it, Amanda. What is the contingency plan in the event of a major source of revenue suddenly disappearing? That's what you should rely on your board for. Does the board have a strategic plan? As a member of a coalition, as a leader of the coalition, you should have your strategic plan like bam, right there all the time, and let people know what's their level of involvement, how they came up with it. As an organization, each year we have to have insurance policies that cover myself and our board members. So that's a good question to ask. And then this one I liked was, why was I chosen as a board member? So I just went through nomination process, and really, I don't know how I would answer that. As someone said, I would tell them the truth, but like, I think it's kind of cool for them to always be aware of why they joined your board. Some of them I will ask, like, what's your goal while you're here? And one board member very specifically was like, I want to help you develop a marketing committee. And he served 3 years, and that's exactly what he did. And he helped us come up with the charter, the language around it, work with our staff. So I thought it was neat to just ask him what do you want to do while you're here? I know what I need you to do, but what do you want to do? So we will send the resources, but just as the last slide before a couple of minutes of questions and kind of final thoughts, this is my challenge to you. So after today, I encourage you to establish a timeline to look at your bylaws, create them or review them, look at your governance structure, see if it kind of aligns with some of the best practice that I talked about, develop an annual fund plan. Maybe it's $500 that you want to raise, just something, just set a goal that people can help you with. And then read one of the further resources that will provide to you to expand your knowledge on nonprofit governance. Okay, Amanda, questions? And then I know we have this last slide too.
So one question that's come up is in the outline chart that you gave, it was you don't add grants to your fund development plan outside of private and corporate foundations.
No, government grants are not included in our fund development because that is things that we're doing external to our work with the board. So they don't necessarily help us write. The development committee does not help us write our government grants. I do that. And we also have a part-time consultant that helps me. So when we're looking at our annual fund plan, it's really those dollars that are external to our government grants. And an ultimate goal is that no more than 50% of your funds would come from the government.
So addendum to that, public foundation grants that aren't corporate, would that be included?
Yes. So Andrea, an example of like we have 3 foundations that we're looking at right now, PNC, the Schiff Foundation, and the third one is the Robert J. Reichert Foundation. So those are what's included in our annual fund plan. But any government funds is a separate document. City, county, state, federal are all tracked.
Another question we have is, have coalition members fundraised for a coalition before? Some of their members have expressed conflicts of interest in fundraising for another nonprofit.
I think I would have to understand that more on a case-by-case basis, but those that we send in the community typically work for businesses and they have their case for support, and it's a very direct ask of maybe their organization. But I can understand where there might be a conflict of interest, specifically if they work for another nonprofit and they're doing their own thing. But really, I think those that you're bringing around the table should represent sectors of the community and not necessarily nonprofits, because that could get sticky in those particular situations. I think the one conflict of interest, I know one of our board members got a new job. Initially, when he started, he was in finance, and then he started working for a nonprofit, and he was our development chair. So that was a big fat red flag. He could stay on the board, but he could no longer be a part of development just because that's what he was doing for his job. So it was conflict, helping us raise funds, potentially taking our lists and our ideas and doing it in his own.
I think that concludes the questions, unless anyone.
I'm excited for you all to take a look at the resources that I've provided, because I've really tried in the past couple of years. It's so easy to go towards people in the social sector, and it's an easy go-to because that's what I'm comfortable with. But I need people that are in not in nonprofits. I need people who are external to the work that we do.
So,
I can give you the company that we use. A lot of that, Michelle, is it's a insurance policy for me in signing documents, and it also protects the board from like coming up with funds if we were to go in financial crisis. I don't know those various specifics off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share the company that we work with. But it's the directors and operators D&O insurance. So I don't want to speak wrongly about it, but if you email me, I can send you who we work with. But it's also like, I don't ever let my staff sign things. I sign everything just because I'm protected no matter what. Even if it's like an MOU with a church down the street, like I really try to make sure that I'm signing it all because I don't want to put them in a bad spot. All right, we're 1 minute over. Do you want to go over the QR code to make sure?
Sure thing. If you want to put your camera up to the QR code right there, take a picture and capture the link, you can complete the evaluation survey. Just a reminder that you have to have attended the majority of this particular webinar in order to get a continuing education unit. And we will send those certificates out within 30 days. We do have to process them with the board, so please give us within 30 days. This recording will be available on our Training Hub tab at prevention-first.org. Again, probably give us a couple weeks on that, but then Nicole will be giving you the supplemental materials that she has talked about throughout the presentation.